My name is Dwayne Schneff, and I'm the oldest son of Thora and Ray Schneff. One of the things I liked best about Grandma was that she was always involved and active, and she had a great memory. She had a gift for remembering dates and important things like that. And she always knew when someone was pregnant and when they were going to deliver, and she knew everybody's birthday.
I'm Marlene Schneff Porter. I am Max and Carolyn's daughter. I was born in 1951, and we lived in Queen Creek at that time. And so I grew up in my early years in Queen Creek, and I was able to spend some time around Grandma and Grandpa. I'm the third, so it was Dwayne, then Lonnie, then me. And so I was the oldest granddaughter, and I did get to spend some time with them. And I especially remember Grandma. I remember Grandpa on occasion, but I didn't really spend a lot of time with him. The men in those days worked long hours, but Grandma took time and spent some time with me, and I liked to do a lot of the things that she liked to do.
I am Sherry Kanega Harmon. My mom was Maudine Elizabeth Schneff, the only daughter in that group of hooligans. We had some great times when we were really little. I remember this swimming pool at their house, and that was always a fun day to go out and swim in the swimming pool. And of course, there was always a barbecue or something going on. And
my name is Kevin Donald Schneff, the firstborn son of Don and Mary Schneff, Don being the sibling number 6 of Jack and Maud Schneff. Well, they lived really close to us when I was born and was being raised. Summertime, I went with them all the time. To Greer, to the cabin. I spent my summers with them. And so they were like my second parents.
I'm Larry Schneff. I am one of the grandkids, one of the older group of grandkids. So I spent some time with Grandpa, got to know him, the good and the bad, got a little bit of both sides of him. He did like to have a good party. He did like to have family around. We did have a bunch of swimming parties and parties eating corn, but his personality and the way he was raised was to be tough and stern. I don't think he was ever really taught to be compassionate and overly caring. That was Grandma's responsibility, and she was the softer side of him.
I'm Tracy Kanega Grace, and I am the second child of Maudine Schneff, who was Grandma and Grandpa's only daughter. And some of the memories I have obviously mostly rotate around Greer. We would go up to Greer almost every summer, and it was so much fun. A lot of good memories there. Grandma taught me how to play solitaire, and that's pretty much what we did. Every day was play solitaire. And Grandpa occasionally would take us fishing.
I'm Mark Schneff. I'm the youngest of 3 boys that belong to Ray and Thora Schneff. Ray was the oldest of Jack and Maud's clan. I can remember going up to the cabin to visit them in the early 80s when I was dating someone, and I took my girlfriend at the time up to the cabin. And of course, Grandma was very careful to make sure that we were staying, in separate rooms. But I could remember hearing Grandpa in the other room talking to Grandma going, "What the hell are they doing up here?" It's like, it is just such a waste of time to have her up here. I'm thinking, I hope she didn't hear that. But I mean, face to face, he was okay, but he wasn't real happy about the fact that they were entertaining one of the grandsons with his girlfriend that they didn't care anything about.
I'm Elisa. I'm Don and Mary's daughter. I grew up in Queen Creek at the old homestead home. That's the earliest I remember is there. We lived in one of the 3 little houses when I was born, but we moved to the homestead. Grandma and Grandpa lived across the driveway from us, and so we used to go over there, knock on the door, and they'd let us in, and we'd just play and just do our own thing. We didn't bother them. We just liked to be with them. They built the house down the road, so we'd go down there a lot, and Grandma would always make us root beer floats, but most of the time they were Pepsi floats.
My name is Brad Schneff. I'm the son of Daryl Schneff and Margaret Ellsworth, or Margaret Schneff. And I was born and raised first 20 years of my life in Queen Creek. As I'd like to say sometimes, Mark Steff is the youngest of the oldest, and I'm the oldest of the youngest. They lived a few miles from us. We grew up out on what is now Schneff Road, which is about 6 miles from Grandpa's farm. And but Grandpa was very involved in the farming activity, so we saw him on our farm almost daily. And one of my fondest memories was he would come by the house, usually pretty early, around 7:30, and he always had a package of butterscotch Lifesavers, and that was one of my favorite things to get from him in the morning if I could catch him.
So Grandma was kind of a health nut, and she was way ahead of her time. She always wanted to eat properly. She knew what every vitamin was for, and she would let you know. When I was born with eye defect, we built a house in Chandler. Next door to us, Bob and Maudie and Kaneka built a house, and across the street, Grandma and Grandpa built a house. And so when we moved into those houses, it was fun for us because we got to spend a lot of time with both our cousins next door and our Grandma and Grandpa across the street in their house. So Grandma made an effort to take it upon herself to see if she couldn't make my sight better. And so she had me scheduled to come to her house several times a week after school, and she created a whole regimen of eye exercises for me to do. And so I would sit in front of her and she would tell me what I was supposed to do, and I would do the eye exercises up and down and everything. So then she gave me vitamins to take, and then I went to her house multiple times a week to do eye exercises.
I remember visiting them in their house, their newer house on the home place here. They loved their dog Cinder, and I guess they had several of them over the years. And every time I would ride down to go visit them, they would always have to show me the new trick that they had taught Cinder, whichever version Cinder that was. They had taught Cinder a new trick. So that was kind of the focus of everything. Oh, Mark, come in here. We got to show you this. We got to show you this. And so, they were showing me what they had taught Cinder recently.
When he tried to teach me things, I would just learn to be quiet and just copy what he did. Sometimes he'd tell me I did a good job, and sometimes he would say, well, let's try that again and see if you could do better. But he didn't really like to show much love physically. He didn't like to hug. He didn't like to give compliments. If you got a compliment from him, you did something really good that he was proud of.
When Don and Daryl were about 12 and 14, Jack was their father, and he purchased a little car for them called a King Midget. And it seated 2 people, and it had a motor in the back, a gasoline-powered motor in the back, and they were able to toot around the farm and enjoy it, and it was really a neat thing. Well, they used it until it was in a little bit of disrepair, and it was about time for them to get their driver's license and their own big cars. So my dad asked my grandfather, and he agreed to let that be repaired a little bit. And then Lonnie and I had the opportunity to be the big guys in the little car and go to every corner of the farm.
Fond memories I have is hanging out over either at the home place or Grandpa and Raymond's place was, or our place, and hanging out in the shop where all the guys were working on the equipment, because that was where all the action happened. They were taking things apart that were broke and putting things back together. The language could get a little colorful at times, which was always fun as a young boy. I was on the other end of the spectrum in terms of place of birth, so I was a very young boy when Grandpa was farming out here. And so I recall Grandpa farming a little bit. It wasn't long after that he slowed down his farming. It didn't quit, but he sort of slowed it down and had his boys doing most of the farming. So my recollection of those times, Grandpa spent a lot of time, he liked the outdoors. He loved the outdoors. So he had a boat, or he had a camp trailer, And, of course, you probably heard he's had the cabin in Greer. So I spent time with Grandpa. He had a pontoon boat and we would go fishing with him over to Lake Havasu. I remember a trip to Lake Havasu with Grandma and Grandpa, going over and pulling that pontoon boat and putting it in Lake Havasu. I think we probably spent 3 or 4 days camped out on that boat, and Grandpa teaching me how to thread a water dog onto a hook so I could catch a bass. And spending some time out there was really a fun time.
And one thing I don't remember about Grandma is people have these stories about how their grandmother was a wonderful cook and a baker and everything. I don't remember Grandma ever baking or cooking much. So I don't remember going to Grandma and having, cookies and things like that. I remember every holiday getting a book, a church book from Grandma. That was her gift to, I assume it was to all the grandkids, but, and I was always, like, oh, great, another book from Grandma. But it was awesome. And she always had this wonderful little note written in it. When I went on my mission, she was there for my farewell, and I don't remember very many letters from her on my mission, but she was very supportive and awesome. I also remember her, she was good at crocheting, and she made all these wonderful covers for the grandkids, and I still have mine. And she did that. She did a lot of quilting, which she made and gave away. I don't know how many dozens, if not hundreds of those things.
They do have good memories of, the things that they did for us. They provided us a place to go during the summer to have fun, and they helped us have fun up there with the things that they exposed us to. I know that my dad would go hunting with Grandpa when Kurt was still alive. They went elk hunting together, and we have pictures of that elk that my dad killed, and Grandma and Grandpa are there, and Kurt had his little spear like he had, taken the elk on his own. But so, there are lots of good things that they did for our family, and I'm really grateful for that.
When they lived in this house, and I don't remember what the years were, it was when they were between houses. They were building a new house on the home place, and they had moved, I guess it was from the Chandler house, and they were living in this house. And I used to ride my bike down and visit Grandma and Grandpa, and the pool was there, and so occasionally I would go swimming in the pool that was right next to the house. But Grandma was always there. Grandpa was usually out tinkering, doing stuff, and not spending a whole lot of time with me, but Grandma was always there. And I remember I had a couple of great trips with Grandma and Grandpa, one up to the cabin with Kevin, and it was a fishing trip. So Grandma and Grandpa, they had their camper. So we had the cabin, and then they drove to Big Lake, and we stayed in the camper and went out on the lake on the boat. And then we did a lot of traveling as a family, Mom and Dad and Dwayne and Lonnie, and Janet and Linda and me. I was much younger, so but trips to San Diego, fishing trips to San Diego, when we would stay at the Half Moon Inn, and Dad would charter a boat. We'd all go out fishing, and I spent the entire time being sick, and I was just a kid anyway. But just all the fun interaction with Grandma and Grandpa.
Grandma taught me how to crochet. She taught me how to cross stitch. She, when I was up in Greer with her, I'd sit on the floor in front of her where she was crocheting those necklaces, and we hand her beads as she needed them. I remember one time Christy and I went fishing at Reservation Lake with Grandma and Grandpa in their little pop-up camper. And I just remember loving Grandma so much, and Grandpa was kind of scary, but I loved him too. I was terrified of Grandpa for, most of my life until I became more of an adult and realized that was just a schnepp trait. My mother was the same way. My friends were terrified of my mother, and I could never figure out why, because she wasn't mean, she wasn't grumpy, but that's how they they took her. And I was the same way with Grandpa. I didn't always feel like I was hugely welcome around Grandpa, because I know he didn't tolerate kids as well. But the times in Greer were great times.
I can remember that, Grandpa was very proud of the fact that he owned 22 Cadillacs in his lifetime, and they built like 5 houses. So you see the side of that and you think, well, gosh, they were pretty flashy people. And they kind of were. I mean, I remember it was before my time, but I remember seeing a photograph of Grandma standing next to her Jaguar that Grandpa had purchased her for Christmas, I think. And so Grandpa loved cars. He loved cars, and he especially loved Cadillacs. And that's why he was so proud of the fact that he was able to buy 22 Cadillacs, and he paid cash for every single one of them. And so that was a big deal to him. But the flip side is they were also very frugal. They had lived through the Great Depression, and they were very poor through most of the Great Depression, not all of it, but through some of it. And so they also had a real frugal side to them that would kind of catch people off guard. I can remember the cabin, the little workshop in the cabin, Grandma and Grandpa never threw anything away. I mean, they always had something. There could be a purpose for that little item in the future. And so they saved. They weren't hoarders or anything like that, but they just saved all these little things that at one point in time, we just had to get rid of because there was so much of it. I remember the story of where we went to a hotel and we're staying at a hotel, and Grandma wanted to make sure that they knew it was a room. They had a room with two beds, and she wanted to make sure that the hotel staff knew that they only slept in one bed, one of the beds, so they should get a discount because the maid wouldn't have to clean the other bed. So they just had this really kind of frugal side to them, as well as this very, buying cars and building houses. And
one Christmas that was really special out at the farm was when everybody came out and got together in the kitchen area. Grandma was doing the cooking with some help, but all of the other ladies and in the family were sitting around talking. And then in the living room were most of the men around the Christmas tree doing that kind of thing. And I think Marlene showing her latest dance moves and things, because she was one of the older girls, and she was always doing singing and dancing. And when she came to something like that, she did a little performance because everybody wanted to see where she was at and how she was doing. And I happened to wander into the kitchen and be there when it was obvious that Grandma there was something she wanted to tell, and Maudine didn't want her to tell. And Grandma just wanted it to be told. And finally Maudine said, "Okay, I'll tell you." She was concerned that Bob might hear her say it, but Bob had just agreed to take the missionary lessons, and that was the biggest news of the occasion. And he did take the lessons, and shortly thereafter, he was baptized.
Grandpa had a reputation for being a little bit of a grouch. But my dad was a little bit of a grouch. So I was kind of used to that. I wasn't really scared of Grandpa any more than I was scared of my dad. And it's just the way they were. But he was, Grandma was the kind, loving one, and Grandpa was the not so kind, loving one, at least in a physical way. But I never was like scared to be around him or anything like that. He was just he was more serious than Grandma was, and Grandma definitely was the softer side and brought out the softer side in Grandpa.
And they had moved from the house on the farm over here by the old place. They built the house over on the farm that I lived on. Grandpa built a really nice house, and he built a really nice shop, RV storage place next to him, and we would spend time over there. He wasn't very far. Grandma and Grandpa weren't very far from our house at that point. They were only maybe a mile away, so it was really easy. We spent a lot of time, again, he spent a lot of time in the shop, even though we were doing the farming scaled back quite a bit. He was still down at the farm. He even put I think it was an Airstream trailer. He backed it into the Kwanzaa hut there, so he had a place to go lay down and take a nap, and while in between working on stuff. For Grandpa, really enjoyed the outdoors, and one of his favorite things to do was fish. I think he liked the process more than the product, but he enjoyed the fishing part of it. So, and then we spent some more time again up at the cabin. We'd go up there, and a few of us would go up and help him do things around the cabin where he couldn't quite do them the way he used to, and we would help him up there. But you had to be careful, because if you're up there working on Grandpa's cabin and you happen to leave your tools, they were now his, because he just considered him his. If you left him there, you obviously didn't need him anymore.
Well, my stories of Grandpa mainly are me visiting their home, and I remember him always having a big easy chair, and I remember him smoking a cigar and just he was good and sweet to me. I remember other people saying he was gruff, but he wasn't ever that way with me.
I remember her telling us stories about her ancestors, about the grandma with no legs, and, all of those stories that she would tell us. And I in later life was glad that she had told us those things, because, those trials that they went through that she would tell us about helped me when I was overseas and hating life, in this little goofy house with no heat. And, it was Okinawa, and it was terrible. We were on water rationing, and I was pregnant with my 4th child, and I just felt like the world had fallen through, for me. And so I would remember those stories and think, well, dang, this is nothing compared to what they had to go through. So I was really glad to know some of those stories that she had told us about. It was nice to remember that.
I enjoyed spending time with Grandpa. He was a character. He taught me some colorful language. But he worked very hard. He really taught the element of work, hard work and appreciation of family, of everything that you had. I do remember when I was on my mission, they came to Jack and Maud were heading to the Northwest to go on a fishing trip. Stopped in Portland and took me to dinner or lunch or something. Spend some time with them while I was up there. I think he wanted me to get in the truck with them and go on up to Canada and go fishing, or Washington, wherever they were going. I couldn't do that, but I appreciate the fact that they took the time to stop and to come by and to visit.
The temple aprons that she made for pretty much, I think, all the girls in the family. She came over one day and wanted me to draw a leaf for her, a fig leaf. And so I did, and she made that into temple aprons for all of the grandgirls. And I always thought that was such a loving thing to do for all of us. And she managed to get so many done for all of us to have. And I have it every time I go to the temple, and it makes me think about her every time. So it's kind of nice to have a little piece of her with us.
They never went anywhere alone. They were always together. Like when they went to Greer, they both went to Greer. One didn't go and the other stay. And I remember they'd go up there, and then they'd have to come back to the farm and check on things, and then they'd go back. Grandma loved Grandpa so much. She didn't ever want to go anywhere without him. Grandma was always giving to others. She always took food or clothes to people in need. Greg Felton remembers that when he was a child and his parents were divorced, that Grandma would come over with food and clothes and give it to them. She was always doing things like that.
Grandma always had a sixth sense, and she, for some reason, could always tell if a woman was pregnant. And I never quite figured it out, but I remember distinctly riding in the car with her one day, and it must have been in 1987-ish, and I was just barely pregnant with Rusty, my last baby. I had a big gap between children, and I wasn't going to tell anybody I was pregnant for a long time. And she looked at me and she said, when's the baby due? And I just, what? And she said, yep, you're pregnant, aren't you? And I had to spill my guts and tell her, yes, I was pregnant, and just keep wondering how she knew that. And I remember about that same time being in a car with her and my grandmother, Margaret Ellsworth, and I don't remember where we were going or what we were doing, but all three of us were in a conversation in the back seat. And my grandma Nani, which is Margaret, had Alzheimer's at this time, and she wasn't making a lot of sense. She could carry on a little bit of a conversation, but not always make a lot of sense. And Grandma, on the other hand, was as sharp as a tack. She didn't forget anything. She was very observant. And as we talked, I remember asking them how old each of them were. And my Grandma Nani was younger than Grandma Schneff. So she said how old she was. Grandma Schneff said how old she was, but she added as a little postscript there, "Yep, but at least I have all my marbles." So we had a fun laugh about that one, and it was true.
So not long after Grandpa passed away, Grandma moved in with my mom. My mom and dad took an upstairs bedroom and moved her into the master so she wouldn't have so many stairs. And I always really admired her willingness to just walk away from all her worldly possessions. She didn't bring anything with her. I think she brought a bookcase or two, that she really liked some bookcases that were from their pretty house in Queen Creek. But she didn't want any of her stuff anymore. She had told the grandkids to come get whatever in her house when she was living out there on the golf course. And she walked away and left it all right there in the house, and that was just okay with her. I thought that was admirable that she just, at that point, realized how temporal it was and that none of that matters. She was always happy to see people when they came, and she was just very practical, very pragmatic, I thought, with her attitude about things. And
when my dad became aware that I was planning on going on a mission, he told me he didn't agree with that, and he didn't think that I should do that. He thought that I should stay home and continue to go to school and to be more active in the farm. The day of my farewell, Grandma had a party at their house there on the farm. I sat down and we were there at the party for a while, and pretty soon Grandpa leans over to me and he says, "If your dad doesn't pay for your mission, I will." And that meant a lot to me. And not that I figured that I would need it, but that he would say something like that. But the rest of the story goes on that Ray and Thora flew me up to report to Salt Lake, and 2 months after I was out in the mission field, I got the sweetest letter from my father saying that he wanted to do that.
Grandma, she was always consistent all the time. She never wavered. And she put up with a lot living with him. She did. But she was very forgiving. And that was one thing I always remember about her. A very forgiving soul. And no matter what kind of offense you did against her, she would forgive you immediately. And put her arm around you and tell you how much she loved you. That was Grandma. So they kind of worked out together. His attitude about people and life and hers. They kind of went together, even though they were opposites.
So I would just like to say how much I'm thankful for my heritage and what a rich blessing it is to be a Schneff and to have known my grandparents. There are so many people that don't ever know their grandparents, and we were fortunate enough not only to see them and know them, but to live nearby and to have great experiences and to be on the receiving end of their generosity in both time and space, where we could spend summers with them in the mountains and where we could go gather the eggs in the barn. And I'm very, very thankful for that. And I'm thankful for the honesty and integrity that they brought into our family. I think about Grandma a lot. When I was married, Grandma gave me a temple apron that was part of my clothing for being married, and I still have that. And every time I go to the temple, I think of her, because I look at that and I see her handiwork. She made it, she embroidered it, and it's a beautiful antiquity, I guess I could say, but a beautiful remembrance of her love for a granddaughter. I had an experience one time I have a really, really good friend who is a massage therapist, and she came one day to my house and brought her massage table to give me a massage. Just as a little side note, my friend that came to give me the massage that day is a gifted healer, and I've known her for 40 years, and she has a gift of being sensitive to the spirit and seeing things that we don't always see, and telling us the things that are going on around us that our eyes don't always see. And in my living room, I had a picture, and it was a picture of the Savior and angels that had come to minister to the children when the Savior was there. And as my friend gave me the massage, she looked at that picture, and then it was very still and quiet, and she said, "I feel angels in this room." And I said, "Well, don't you love that picture?" And she said, "No, literally, I feel real angels in this room." And then later on, she came to me and said, "I want to describe to you the lady that I saw while I was giving you a massage, because she had a message for you." And the more she described her, I truly believed she was describing Grandma Schneff. And she said, "The message that she gave me to give to you is, please don't forget me." And so I don't know who she saw, but I'm going to imagine, and I'm going to take that Grandma Schneff was sending us all a message that she loves us and she doesn't want to be forgotten. She wants us to remember her for the good person that she was and all the time and energy she put into making our family a good one.
I have always felt really blessed that I had an opportunity to know Grandma and Grandpa. But he cared about his family. He took care of his family. He loved his mother. He had other members of his family that he and Grandma financially took care of and helped over the decades. And so, and Grandma came from this amazing Mormon pioneer stock, where she has just these heartfelt stories about her mother and her grandmother, and the trials and tribulations that they went through. And so we have so much to be proud of as members of the Schneff family, and having Grandma and Grandpa as our ancestors, because they really paved the way for our family's future. First of all, working so hard and getting through the Depression when things were so awful, and raising 7 kids, and then having the foresight to come out here and buy a desert, and turn it into a farm and create a life for all of their kids. And all of their kids at one point in time were involved in farming. Some of them didn't stay with farming, some of them did other things, but Grandma really cared about trying to keep the family together. And with 7 kids, 6 of them boys, and being very headstrong, there was some conflict there. And there were years when some of those brothers didn't talk to each other. And that was hard for Grandma. And she and Grandpa, they just kind of pushed through and did what they could to mend those fences and make sure that their family stayed together. And I think it's a great lesson for all of us in our generation, and now I'm part of the older generation. So the younger generations that are coming up, to know that they're really part of an amazing heritage, and they should be incredibly proud of the sacrifices and the hardships that they went through, and just the great things that they did to keep their family together.